Hello, today I'm going to be talking about an independent project process that I've been working on, sort of a brainstorm that I hopefully will flesh out in the future in like a PhD program or just further down in my career. But I thought it would be fun to show it kind of in action. This YouTube video has really been to talk about some of my independent projects that I've been working on because yeah, it's been kind of just a solo process of really exploring, and it's just been a very personal process for me, starting to sow some seeds in my psychology career, my neuroscience career, and a lot of the seeds that I'm sowing are so related to my personal lived experience with PTSD, with recovered memory, and with being a survivor of sexual violence. Basically, what I'm about to show you. So, I've been working on a really, really intense personal project that I'm about to submit to hopefully be a sort of school project. But I've been really intensely working on a project, basically trying to link this learning chemical and arousal chemical called acetylcholine to some symptoms of dissociation and some of the processes of trauma formation. And I have been feeling pretty strongly about the connection that I found on what I'm writing. Hopefully, the project will be done soon, and it can be a really strong indicator of that connection in trauma. And basically, where I'm going from here is that I've actually been sort of brainstorming a therapy type alongside of this, because if what I found is correct, that means that there's actually a medication out on the market already called scopolamine that I hopefully this will flesh out into like a PhD program or something, but it would be a good potential medication option maybe for people with dissociative experiences, dissociative amnesia particularly. I was thinking that's untested yet. That's sort of next on the research list, but it's kind of cool to think about because the thing is that people with dissociative experiences, dissociation has just been thoroughly understudied, particularly things like recovered memory, dissociative amnesia. There hasn't really been enough backing, enough work, and there hasn't been a strong sort of central mechanism as to why this phenomenon occurs. I feel pretty strongly that what I found is going to be that, and I've been really excited to publish it. But because of that lack of understanding, there hasn't ever been a sort of medication specifically geared towards dissociation at all. And there are other types of therapies that are great for people with dissociation, complex PTSD, etc. But they usually the thing is that people who struggle with dissociation, particularly dissociative disorders like dissociative identity disorder and etc., therapy can be really, really difficult for them, really draining, because usually what the reason that people start to develop these disorders is that they have trouble integrating difficult memories, and in integrating them, sometimes it leads to really extreme like suicidality, mania, things like that. And it can be just a really extensive process. A lot of times, in the most extreme end, people with dissociative identity disorder, particularly, I'm thinking of, people end up sort of flip-flopping around through a lot of different sort of treatment clinics, psychiatric wards, or just drifting through therapy for a very long time, talking about their trauma for a very, very long time and not really seeing much of a result. So I struggled so much with my dissociative experiences, and I still, even though I had a period of a really complex trauma that lasted me for maybe like 7, 8 months. It was a period of really difficult period in my life of abuse, and then I was able to leave the situation, and in leaving the situation I started to recover memory. I struggled a lot with dissociative experiences past that. A lot of really, really intense PTSD reactions. The way that I navigated the world changed so much in the aftermath of trauma. And even now, this is what, like 6 years after that period, I'm still struggling, but I'm much better. Just overall much better, but I still struggle a lot with a lot of the things that I'm actually going to explore in this workbook that I've sort of been developing today for this potential treatment type. And I learned a lot about what the experience of navigating trauma, the experience of moving through the world in a dissociated body, even also through, in therapy, what does it feel like to have dissociation in therapy? What were the things I found difficult? What were some needs that I felt maybe weren't getting met, or some difficulties that I was having? And that was really informative for me. It was really informative for me for my neuroscience project that I'm working on. And it's been really informative as I've basically started to develop a therapy that's really been led by my lived experience, having dissociation, dealing with recovered memory, and etc. And I'm going to actually fill out the workbook that I'm showing you now. I'm going to talk about some of the lived experience behind the choices that I've made so far. This is, again, still not really 100% in like there, but I just wanted to show it because it's been a really, really personal process for me of surviving. It's been a process of me, it's been a deep healing process for me, and this feeling of like I can take these lessons that I've learned, and I can take this experience and I can use it in a useful way. I can use it in a way that's going to uplift my life and help other people. And that's been really special for me. And it's been a process that I've really wanted to sort of keep track of because it's again, this is my survival story right here. And it's been really special for me. But I also wanted to share because I feel like I don't really see much representation of people who have dealt with dissociative experiences. I had some pretty intense ones as well that I'm going to continue to process even myself in therapy and etc. But also I felt so hopeless, so like frustrated, etc. Having dissociative experiences, having this sort of complex trauma experience in therapy. I didn't feel sometimes, not by my therapist, but by general psychology. Sometimes I didn't feel believed. I didn't feel validated. I felt like I was struggling. I felt resentment or frustration, like why can't anybody understand my experience? Why aren't people going after it? Why isn't there enough science? And it really hindered my healing process in the beginning, but it helped me to be somebody who was going to be that person and to add the science. And I really hope that it can give people a little bit of hope as well if you struggle with dissociative experiences. This is probably going to be a long process in my life of working on this, but I just want more. I want more for people with dissociative experiences, particularly if you've been really struggling in like through this cycle of feeling like it's taking so long to heal, which I get it. Like I said, I'm 6 years into the process and I'm much better, but I'm still struggling a lot all the time. I would have loved to have a medication. I really want to develop a process with medication, and that's what I've basically been setting out to do here. So I'm going to show you the workbook that I've been writing today. I'm going to explain a little bit about what this therapy that I've imagined is going to look like. It's very in the early stages, but just to show you how my lived experience is translating into something really impactful and really beautiful that is still in the early stages, but will grow. I believe in myself. I believe it's going to grow. So I started to think about the reason that I was able to develop the science I'm developing in the first place is because I was really struggling with these sorts of intense bouts of stress in the aftermath of trauma they weren't anxiety attacks. They were like a general sort of feeling that the world was too overwhelming for me to handle anymore. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more later, but that was what clued me in to a certain chemical. I was like, I think this chemical is doing this. I didn't find the chemical right away, but I thought it's going to be something that makes me feel like this. And then I was able to find a certain chemical that was like, oh, I think it's going to be this. And in doing more research, it seemed pretty well backed, right? As I went along, I was reading about this chemical and I read about a medication that people use to lower that chemical, which normally is not a good thing because normally people don't normally have this up for extended periods of time in the way that I think I'm about to show is happening for people with trauma. But in this situation, I thought, well, that might be a good option if people are having it really high up, right? So then I started to think about my lived experience, about what it felt like to recover memory. The reason that I was able to find that chemical in the first place, and I think it's this, is because I was going through a cycle for a few years after this traumatic experience. I'm still going through this cycle myself. Actually, I'm still in the loop. I'm still in this cycle. I'm still healing. But basically what would happen is I noticed that when I was going through that traumatic experience, not only was the stressful experience stressful, and I was still my environment before I was able to recover memory, I was still in an environment with the perpetrator and their friends that were enabling. I was still in that environment. I didn't have a social like sort of backup. I also was dealing with other life stressors on the side. And in that environment, that was the environment that I developed my dissociative amnesia in. Now, when I had pointers when I was in that situation that I wouldn't have known because I had no ability to recall what happened to me, but I had, in hindsight, moments that pointed to me that I started to have really, really intense mental health symptoms. I started to deal with suicidality and with just really, really intense sort of symptoms that I was struggling with horrible depression. I had horrible low self-esteem, but I didn't know what was happening to me. So soon after I cut off the people that were perpetrating this, I was in a new environment. I had a lot of different life stressors dissipate. And in that dissipation of those external stressors and in cutting off the person that was probably increasing my stress levels because he was still there, I was able to recover my first bit of memories. And that was intense. That was a lot. And then after that period, I dealt with really intense dissociative sort of symptoms again. So I had another round of different dissociative symptoms. So that was for a while. It was kind of like my brain was distracting me. It learned to distract me with really sort of intense stories that were being generated on the inside, really intense sort of anxieties and things. So then I was able to sit with that for a while. After that, I was back in school. I had another stressful experience over the summer. I was back at school. School was incredibly stressful for me because I was very dissociated. And I was also struggling with managing PTSD. I was still on the same campus. The perpetrator was still not there but around, etc. And I had intense amount of schoolwork. In that environment, I had other PTSD symptoms. I had nightmares, I had anxiety attacks, I had etc. But I didn't recover more memories yet. Then that's the next about 2 summers later, I had finished school. I had a room to myself for the summer, etc. All of a sudden, I had an uptick of mental health symptoms again, which is usually what would happen before I started to recover memory. I would get into a less stressful environment. I would start to have an uptick of some kind of mental health symptom, whether that be I started to get urges to engage in really negative coping mechanisms again, or I started to have really, really intense like depersonalization or derealization, etc. And then I started to recover more fragments that I couldn't really comprehend well. And then that was really, really stressful for me. And it would go through the cycle where I noticed that, for example, when I was heading off to bed, sometimes when I was heading to sleep and I was about to sleep, I would get memories. But during the day, I didn't really, things like that, that it really clued me in as to how my recovered memories were operating, that there was a logic to the recovered memories, and there was a period of time or a period of conditions that enabled my mind to recover those memories more. And then after that, usually it was stressful again. I had a difference in how I reacted to the stress. So that really taught me navigating the recovered memories themselves and how that felt for me, what I needed, etc. That taught me a lot. So I'm going to talk about that in the workbook, but that was what clued me in. And first of all, noticing that pattern myself helped me a lot because it helped me to understand when I was going to have the kind of symptoms that I was going to have. It helped me to understand why my body was reacting in certain ways. And then later on, when I was able to do the research, when I was able to get this project together and it made more sense, I started to understand, okay, these are the kinds of conditions that will help me heal. And because of that, I was able to start putting together what I thought a medication would look like. I did a lot of research on dissociative disorders, dissociative identity disorder, and etc. And what kind of therapy processes work for it, and what are the sort of risk factors. I read about a lot of people with amnesia, and I noticed the similarities in how we processed. And that's how I got here. But I'll put some of my videos below where I talk about my lived experience more if anybody's interested. It's really, really guided me a lot through this process. It's been stressful but useful. And yeah. So anyway, so this is the therapy I started to imagine, where you'd go 6 weeks basically with a specially trained therapist who would be trained in this therapy. And this therapy would include a talk therapy component that is basically geared towards people with dissociation, what helps people with dissociation, because there are certain therapy types that are more effective for people with dissociation. A lot of clinicians actually are not really as educated on these specific therapy types as they could be, or maybe not as educated on dissociative disorders. A lot of clinicians also have a bit of stigma towards experiences like dissociative identity disorder. Dissociative identity disorder and dissociative disorders, particularly dissociative identity disorder, is the one that's very, very commonly misdiagnosed, and people will go a really, really long time, like years and years and years, before they finally land on that diagnosis. Often they're misdiagnosed with things like schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder, etc. So it's not, I think that everybody could use more information on dissociation, but I read a specific paper particularly, or quite a few different papers on these therapy types for dissociation. I read one on clinicians and how clinicians that worked with dissociative patients, like what helped them. And I made a list of all the ones that they said were more useful. So all the elements, so these parts therapies, relational attunement. So I guess having a good relationship. I think this is meaning having a good relationship with your therapist that is good chemistry with your therapist that's conducive to that healing. Gradual pacing, and yeah, so I wanted that talk therapy component to be geared towards what actually works for people with dissociation, because I think that a lot of people end up cycling through therapy types that aren't specialized towards the experience that they're having, and there's a reason why these therapy types are more effective. And basically I'm thinking that could be a reason why people end up in therapy for a long time without having much progress, because people are using therapy types that maybe aren't as effective for dissociation as they could be, first of all. Basically, what would happen is that you take 6 weeks of this. I'm saying 6 weeks as an arbitrary number. Like I'll have to figure out how long, but you take the medication for that time period, and then you'd have another like 6 weeks or something without the medication that would be just basically talking through everything, like just normal therapy, but geared towards sort of the aftermath of this medication experience. The medication, the goal of it would basically be to lower arousal enough for people to get into consolidation periods more. In those periods, basically your brain is producing more sharp wave ripples, and sharp wave ripples are these sort of oscillations, these wavelengths that happen in your brain that help you to replay the experiences that you had, so that you can actually consolidate them and have them be part of your memory and sort of understood by you in the bigger framework of you, rather than just stuck and unprocessed. And it would be for people that have it would not be an instant thing, I think, because the good thing about scopolamine or some kind of therapy that induces that consolidation window is that, or gets you closer to it, is that it would probably speed up your ability to process things, but it would be very intense because our minds hide things from us for a reason, and there's a reason why it's hard to sit with some of these emotions. So it would be a very, very there'd be a lot of precautions to take that I'm going to go into, but it would be quite an intense experience, probably emotional experience, sitting with some of the things that you are too afraid to sit with that are probably causing your dissociative symptoms. Maybe things that you have never dealt with emotionally, that you happened when you were a kid, that you didn't really maybe ever share with anybody because you were too young to understand, because it was scary for you, because your brain just couldn't process it at the time. It would probably start to bring some of those things up because you're not in a high arousal state as often, and that can be intense. I know myself, it can be very intense to sit with some of those emotions. So yeah, it would be probably after people have been going through, at least in the start, it would be for people that maybe have already been going through therapy for quite a while. I'm going to talk about that more, but you'd have to have a diagnosis of something like dissociative identity disorder, dissociative amnesia, dissociative disorder not otherwise specified, or maybe certain PTSD expressions, maybe PTSD in general. Though I'm wondering, yeah, probably PTSD would help you sit with some things that you maybe know happened to you, but you just can't face at all. And then also borderline personality disorder, I think there's like a strong overlap there in terms of people that have experienced chronic stress. Because my study is actually on inescapable stress, the one I'm doing now. So that's what I think is going to have the strongest sort of connection there. So probably people with borderline personality disorder who struggle with dissociative symptoms or just complex traumas will probably be good uh, good candidates for this therapy if they've already been through like other sort of if they're in the right headspace and etc. So I'm going to go into that. As I've gone along, I've actually been imagining certain exercises. Actually, I was thinking about this earlier today because I was struggling with something and I remembered an exercise I was trying to imagine that I thought would be useful because it's been a useful exercise for me that I just intuitively leaned on. I'm going to show you. So I imagined that people who engage in this therapy would get this little workbook that comes with them. And I was inspired by, for example, people who, if you've ever done DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, usually people get this workbook of these different coping skills and activities and things. And I thought it would be good to send that along with people because also I think there's really sort of important information that people would have to have on hand because this would be a very vulnerable, like you'd be in a very vulnerable state throughout this therapy, throughout this medication experience. And it would be extremely beneficial, I think. But I think there'd be many precautions to take, even post therapy, that you'd have to sort of learn to navigate the world in a special way. So I'm going to go into it a little bit. This is obviously, I don't have a name yet for this. So I just said scopolamine talk therapy workbook. Hopefully it'll be this medication because that already exists, but I don't know. I haven't tested it yet. I just thought maybe. So if anything, it'll be replaced. So I'd want one of the first pages. I thought about this a lot the other day. Like I want people to understand the science behind what's happening. How is that medication working? And I think it's particularly important because it's going to explain to you what you're about to experience. So I'd want a page basically about what's the science behind the medication, how does it work, and how will that feel for you. So I'm not going to go into all the science right now, but basically it's going to talk about what is acetylcholine, why is that medication going to be dropping the acetylcholine. This would probably also include information that I would have to learn through research. That would be something like, how can you tell if it's dropping too low, because your dose should be changed. And what does it mean for acetylcholine to be elevated? And it's going to talk about if your acetylcholine levels are too high. Sometimes it can stop you from consolidating those experiences because you never get into that consolidation window. Sometimes that can manifest as something like inability to relax, feeling like your mind is racing. This is what I'm thinking. And also insomnia. Just talking about arousal a little bit. What is arousal? And then, yeah, just encoding and consolidation, how you want to be entering those consolidation windows. And the point of the therapy is that it's going to put you in those consolidation windows more, which is when those memories are going to come up for you. This is the first thing I want people to have. There's two different things I think are so important. Okay. Well, actually, this should be flipped. I'm going to talk about my lived experience a bit. So oftentimes when I was in school, I was really struggling badly with PTSD. Sometimes things were really coming up for me, and it was so important to have a support system. I think I could have even done a better job at that. I think if there's one thing I would have wanted to improve in college or strengthen would have been my sense of having a support system around me. I think that makes a big difference. I'm gonna go into a particular memory in a second after I explain this page to you. So I think having a good list of emergency contacts is really important. I actually said, so an emergency contact would be people that are aware that you may need extra support. It can be someone who's a caretaker, a family member, or friends, and they will know that you're on the medication. They will know how the medication works. That would be something that I think would be like a first meeting kind of situation. That would be in an initial assessment to see whether you're even eligible for the medication. You'd say, who is your support system going to be? And you'd have to make that list together. Who are people that you trust? Are there people that you can reliably say they're going to understand this? We're going to have that conversation and they're going to be around me while I'm doing this. And yeah, if my thinking, unfortunately, and I really feel for people that don't have a good support system around them and are struggling, but unfortunately, I think if you go into therapy and you're saying, I really don't have anybody, I can't think of a single person I trust, I have nobody I can ask to be an emergency contact, you're not going to be eligible for the therapy. Because I feel so strongly that it's extremely important to have people around you that are informed, that are going to keep you safe, because the thing is that this therapy type would be so intense. I think not so intense. It can be really intense to have recovered memories come up. I had one time when I was in that summer, like after I already had recovered memories, I had gone through a really stressful time. I was dissociating a lot. All of a sudden, some symptoms elevated, and I started to have more fragments come up. It was very out of the blue for me. It just like hit me all of a sudden a few days after I entered this new room, and I had a horrible anxiety attack. I didn't know what to do. I was in a state of really extreme distress, and I just felt like I can't be in this room by myself. Called my friends. I had a friend stay with me for a while. Then the next day I had other friends that let me stay in their room, and then from that day I had an emergency call with my therapist, and I was able to speak to my therapist. If I had dealt with that alone, I don't know how that could have gone. I had moments in my mental health journey where I actually did have people around me. I'm going to talk about that, but for that moment, I didn't know who to reach out to. And that was really, really distressing for me. And I felt really, really, just really awful. And I really struggled. And I think it's really important. The thing is, I did have people around me, but I didn't know offhand who to reach out to. And we hadn't discussed it previously. So I felt like an imposition, like I was imposing. So I think it's so important if you're going to do a therapy type like this. I actually have quite a few different experiences that I've had where like I had one time I was taking a medication, but I wasn't 100% sort of knowledgeable about the symptoms I could have experienced. And I started to have a bit of a difficult moment. It's actually the same kind of, I had one really complex experience, and that was really stressful for me. So I think it's so important that people know exactly what's going to happen and are prepared for the fact that, the distressing moments are going to happen. It's not a bad thing. They are going to happen. That's part of the therapy. And you need to know what to do when that moment hits. And you need to have people that you have them on a list. You've discussed with them beforehand. You know that they know, and you're ready to reach out to them if you need it. So if somebody doesn't have it, it's not going to be a safe space or a safe time for them to do this therapy option. If someone is if someone is in some kind of long-term psychiatric stay, they can take it in that sort of environment if they have caretakers around them, but you need to have people that are going to watch over you and that are going to understand what you're dealing with, because it's not safe. It's not safe if not. I don't think so at all. If you're going to be recovering memories, you need to know who's going to be there. But I want that to be healthy. Okay, again, these are all things I think if I could have gone back in time and created that environment for myself, this is what I would have done. So emergency contacts, like I said, they're going to be people that they're going to know you're on the medication. And one of the first things you'd have to do is to have a conversation with each of them. All of them are going to know that they're your emergency contacts. It's not just they know too that they are your emergency contacts. And it's gonna have to be sort of a good, healthy conversation about what it means to be an emergency contact. They have to basically accept that that's gonna be a responsibility, but that they also have their own boundaries with it too. So the emergency contact should be informed on how the medication works and on what symptoms they can expect for you to experience. They can also know, I actually thought they should have their own workbook or their own video series that gets handed to them so that they have that on hand. They should have a relationship of informed consent where they know how to handle emergencies and how to assist if they don't have the capacity, because sometimes people are not going to have the capacity to be a support for you in that exact moment. And I learned that myself throughout the process. And you need to know what's going to happen next and who's going to be the next on your list. And also that they're not therapists, but they are there to maybe listen, remind you about coping mechanisms, or direct you to appropriate resources when you are unable to reach out to those resources. So they should know they have their own plan. They should know to maybe make a call or an email to your therapist so that you already have that ready the next day. Provide a safe space for you if that's all you need. or assisting with, you need to take your as needed like anxiety medication or something, or helping you to get to a hospital for safer care if necessary, if they assess and they think, okay, you seem like you're really at risk of harming yourself, I'm going to take you to the hospital. And that's part of the contract they sign with you. So you basically are both going to sign a contract that ensures that you're both comfortable, informed, they know what they're doing, you know why, you know that they've signed on to that and that they're there for you. Accepting that if your emergency contact does not have the capacity to listen, they're going to direct you to a safe next option, including maybe another emergency contact. They should have the list, or another resource. And it's not a rejection for them to do that, but to keep you as safe as possible. I was specifically thinking about that with people who might be taking it with borderline personality disorder. I felt that myself, even just because you're in a very vulnerable space and it's already so vulnerable to reach out for support. But if somebody can't support you in the moment, it's not because they don't care, but because they need to keep you as safe as possible, and that's their responsibility. And if they can't be the person to keep you as safe as possible in that situation, they're in your best interest to let them give you the next person or the next best person or etc., so that you are safe. And I think that should be in the contract too. That's like no hard feelings if you can't reach out. You have your boundaries too, but I do need to be kept safe, and we've agreed to that. We've agreed that you said that you'll help me, and so you're gonna pass it forward. So I think that's the best thing to do, and to have that conversation in therapy, have that conversation with your emergency contacts, and have something signed together that you've discussed it together, they're signed on. And to continue on with the next stages, you need to bring all those signed contracts into therapy. And yeah, so ensure that everybody is informed. So the next page or whatever would be what to do if you start to recover a memory when you're not in therapy. This again, very based on my lived experience here, because okay, sometimes I would imagine this is based off the times that I recovered memories that I was like, whoa, what is happening? Maybe they were fragments, or I had really like intense distress, maybe even at ones that I had already recovered. And I think if you're on that medication, you probably will have to difficult memories come up. Like that's just part of that, means that the medication is working, or that you're consolidating, the treatment is working. But it can be incredibly distressing. So you want to make sure that you're safe and ready to work this out in therapy. So it'd be something like this. You assess your risk level. Can a workbook activity or a coping mechanism help? If you feel okay, you can write it down in your journal. So I want to have journaling prompts ready in the book too, I'm going to show them later. But maybe that's like a good, okay, I'm a little bit confused, or like, whoa, but I'm just going to write it down and talk about it in therapy the next day. How did it feel? What is it, etc. Risk level B, do you need immediate support? Who is your emergency contact? Maybe you need to talk to a friend, or you need somebody to come over or something like that, because you're just feeling a little bit like, whoa. The C risk level is maybe you need to talk to a hotline and then make a therapy appointment for the next day. That can be like another, like, I just really need to chat to somebody because I feel a little bit at risk, but maybe not all the way. Or D, this is your local hospital. If you feel at risk to yourself or need additional support, you can just go to a hospital, maybe call emergency contact, tell them I'm going to a hospital. Here's how to communicate. I want to have something ready for people to explain at hospitals, so that they're not, I think that people, maybe you just need to be there for the night, because this is the thing, is that probably this is going to happen if you're recovering memories. You might get really suicidal for a night or something. It doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily be at risk to be there forever, but it's like maybe you just needed that safe space. Because for me, and this was backed in so many papers I read, sometimes it was really intense initial distress at something that I was like, whoa, this is really scary, and I just felt really, really intense distress for the moment, but I just needed to be around somebody or whatever. Or this is actually an example from my life of me navigating this risk level, where in the time that I first started to recover memory, when I was just struggling with trauma, I had really awful months after that, where I was just trying to sort of reconfigure myself, but it was like really unexpected. I was really shocked, and I was really struggling mentally. I was having a lot of insomnia. I had a night where I got really, really in distress. Like I felt really at risk to myself, and I called somebody, and they weren't able to support in that moment. And then after that, it wasn't because of that, but I was like, I don't know what to do. I felt really claustrophobic in my room. I thought, I'm gonna go check myself into like a hospital. I got there. I felt really claustrophobic. I was like, I don't know. I can't do this. I think I just really needed somebody in that moment. And I called a friend who's now actually in psychology as well. But we talked, we spoke it out, and then I was able to relax and go back to my room, sleep, and then the next day was able to sort of talk to my therapist and also talk to another family member who suggested I just come home, and I went home, right? So sometimes it's not it, you just have that really, really intense stress essentially, and it can be really difficult to deal with, but it's also part of the healing process as well if you're taking a medication like that. And it's just about making sure that you have those safe options. So basically, I want to have like a list already ready in it about this is to tell the hospital like I am taking this therapy. I have a risk happening, but this is something it's something really sort of vulnerable, and it needs to be spoken about with my mental health team. There is a no like this I'm integrating emotions, and I'm on this medication. I need to be kept safe until I can get in contact with my therapist. This is the contact number for my psychiatrist and for my therapist. Please get in contact with them, and they can address further risk levels with you. They can address. So distress doesn't mean something is going wrong, and it's an expected part of the process, but it may mean slowing down, changing your dose, or maybe stopping treatment early and moving back to normal talk therapy. Your psychiatrist and therapist will decide that for you. So this is the thing again, is that it can be so hard to deal with dissociation. A lot of people deal with a lot of distress throughout the process. Like I remember reading one case study of a woman with dissociative amnesia who she really never like people there were things that everybody in her life knew that she had dealt with it, but when they would mention it, she just had no reaction. She didn't remember it at all, even though they knew that it happened to her. And one day she came in contact with something really, really like a really vivid reminder of that time. Like maybe I think she went to her old house or something, and it was too much for her. And she got really, really manic and really, really at risk to herself. And it was really, yeah. So sometimes it can be a lot to confront those things. And that's why it ends up being a really difficult process for people to go through therapy with dissociative experiences. I also read another one where people felt like they were really making progress with their patients that struggled with dissociative experiences, like dissociative disorder or something, like a dissociative disorder or something. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, bam, it was like all the progress went backwards. All of a sudden, the person was really angry or really in pain. And I think that that has to do probably with the fact that it can, there's a sort of process going on of intense stress that can come up as you learn to navigate those experiences. I definitely have gone back and forth on my own healing journey. I had times where I was like, oh, I'm really, really getting better, but there was things under the surface to deal with, and that's part of the process too. So it's to be expected. That's a one big thing that I really want to center, because that again, that's the biggest thing that I learned from my lived experience, is that you can't avoid the intense stress that's going to come from navigating the experience, but I think that needs to just be centered, like sort of supported, and like there needs to be good plans and good sort of mechanisms for how that's going to be dealt with in therapy and individually as well. This is an interesting one. So I'm going to actually fill this out for you a little bit. I have been really thinking about this one, an arousal budget. This has been from my like last 2 years or something, where at first, like I said, when I first recovered memories, at first it was just like a flow of a year that was just filled with really, really intense mental challenges, like really intense sort of really negative sort of coping mechanisms and things. I healed from that, and then I was really struggling with really intense dissociative experiences for a period, right? And then I dealt with some more memories. And after that, I wasn't having those same sort of, I think it really calmed down in my mind, but I got really overstimulated. And I never struggled with overstimulation when I was like younger, like teenager, anything. It was only post trauma that I really started to struggle with this intense overstimulation and this feeling like I have a hard time navigating the world, processing the world, and being in my body. So I'm going to go through what this activity looks like so I can show you. I don't know. So high arousal and dissociation, that could be something that could already have a little bit of information to it. What is dissociation, etc. But I imagine this also as something that people fill out to basically become better aware of what that high arousal feeling, what that feeling feels like, to identify that they are dissociating and what to do about that. So I actually was filling this out at my job, my a work meeting, at another job that I have, because I was in that state and I was like, I thought of the arousal budget again and I started to write everything down, which is how I started writing this workbook. But for me, so this is what high arousal feels like to me. I really, this is my big struggle right now. I don't struggle there. I've healed so much, but this is something that I really struggle with every single day, heavily. And it's been a really, like, that's been my big challenge right now. So what does high arousal feel like for me, or dissociation? So when I'm out, I have certain triggers that I'm going to go into in a second. So everything gets hard to sort of focus on. I feel like I can't focus on any one thing well, where everything is kind of a blur, where it almost feels like life is moving really fast for me, where I can't really focus well on anything. My attention goes everywhere. I feel like I just can't like get my focal point to like focus on like in a normal way. It almost feels like my focus is like really, really stretched out, but then also too intense at the same time. It's like a two in one. I keep having, this one is really interesting, where I start to really intensely feel like my body dislikes me, like my body hates me, or like it feels like sick, or like I can't understand how to, like my body is sort of at odds with me. It feels really out of my control as well. I get the intense urge to escape. Like I just want to leave. Wherever I am, I'm like, I just want to leave. I get really irritable. Like I just want to leave, go be by myself in a dark room. I get irritable. And I also get an eye tick. The eye tick is so annoying. This is a new thing and it makes me feel really self-conscious, but I think it's because I can't get my experience, my mind to focus, where I feel like my eyes won't like relax. Like my eye has this tick. I have someone in my life who also struggled with a really similar experience to me. She gets an eye twitch. I actually have a theory as to why that is, biologically speaking, because there's actually a nerve back here behind the eye that's really important for processing. But both of us get an eye thing. But it's really, I hate it. It's when I start to get in that state. But this is for me what high arousal feels like. When I'm in this mood, it's really, really frustrating and painful. And that's what my dissociation feels like. I struggle with it a lot. It used to feel like, oh, I'm losing track of time. I don't know what's happening. Like the days are just going by and I'm in my head. That's what it used to feel like for me. And then it switched a little bit where it feels like this, because I think that I'm a little bit more in tune with my body, but it's like painful for me. So then the next step would be identify triggers. What are things that trigger this state for you? I was thinking this today because I noticed, I was like, why do I get this at work? Fluorescent lighting is so, it triggers that state for me so bad. Fluorescent lighting, enclosed spaces, when I'm on the train, or like when I take the train to work, and when I'm in those tunnels, those underground tunnels, it gets to me because I think it's also, for example, noisy, echoey spaces where I start to feel like I just want to get out of here, and I feel like really stressed and all this stuff. Um, Things that evoke deep emotions about the past, like music. It's not even just the past, or like things that really are just emotional for me, that things that have high value for me. So those things typically start to trigger that, which is really frustrating. I used to be an obsessive music listener, and I've really had to back away from music a bit because it makes me start to feel that, particularly if the music is about something really emotionally charged for me that I've really been thinking about recently. For example, if I have really strong thoughts about the singer, or if I have like really sort of like an intense sort of, I played this music because it reminded me of someone in the past, it starts to create this energy for me where I feel really, my eye starts to get twitch a lot. I start to feel like everything is sort of too much around me and I have to stop. I have to take a break. Walking around outside, I think it's because there's a lot of visuals going on like at the side of my head, and because I'm having that dissociative issue, it's like it's a lot It's like a lot of stimuli, Big group conversations. I don't know why this is. I think it's getting better because I actually went out with some friends yesterday and I didn't really feel like this, but sometimes when I'm like, I was at my work meeting today, and for some reason being in that space where there's like a lot of people and they're all talking and it creates like a lot of noise, it gives me that feeling where I start to, I don't know. I think it's because it's like a lot of different things at once. I'm like thinking about 10 things at once. I'm thinking about where like positioning myself socially, who am I in this group, I should be engaging, and then there's also the noise, and it's a lot for me. Again, these are things that I never struggled with this in high school. Even through the early stages of college, I didn't struggle with it, but my symptoms changed, and these are things that started to become triggers for me for my dissociative feelings. Work stress, or it's not only work stress, it's the feeling of being pulled into many places at once. I think that one's a little bit less, but we're going to go into that. Triggering content is like a duh. Obviously, if something is triggering my PTSD, it's giving me that feeling. And then, or even if I'm just having or if I just feel triggered in general, I get this feeling up here. Just crowds in general. So what I want to sort of start to get people to think about is how bad are each of these triggers for you? You can put a number on them, or it can just be a sort of internal, because I don't know if I have numbers for them per se. I don't know if I could even put it on that scale. I would say this one for me, it's not that bad unless I start mixing it, So I'm going to talk about that in a second. I would say fluorescent lighting for me is honestly, it's like an 8. It's too much. I hate it. I actually sometimes start wearing like sunglasses when I'm out. Fluorescent lighting and that sort of gray sunlight that you get in England a lot. Enclosed spaces is also a big one for me, like a 6. Walking around outside, sometimes it's not that bad. It's probably like a 5. Work stress is honestly not even as bad. It's probably like a 3. Anyways, this is the kind of conversation I want people to start having with themselves. And now this is the thing. This is the reason that I made this exercise, because again, I struggled with all this, am struggling with this. What I noticed is that I hate this because like I said, I never struggled with this until recently. I feel like a sense of rebellion towards it. Like, I don't like it because I feel frustrated that it stops me from having the experiences that I had before my trauma. I don't like the feeling of having something robbed of me that I used to love, like music. And because of that, I often try to push through the triggers, and I try to just be like, well, I don't care, I'm just going to do it anyways. But then the thing is that I'm getting really depleted and I'm feeling really gross, and I'm feeling more of this feeling in a more intense way where it gets sticky. Like, it sticks with me throughout the day if I don't focus on it or work through it. So what I noticed, so for example, if I'm walking around outside, which is already like a 5, I don't know the number system yet. And then I'm also listening to that music that's really triggering those emotions for me. It's really overwhelming. Like, now we're at an 8 where it's too much and I feel dizzy. I feel like sick. I feel like I need to sit down. I feel afraid and I feel more triggered. Or for example, individually, if I'm just having a big group conversation, it's really not that bad. But if I'm doing if I just had like a work stress and then I'm going to have a big conversation with somebody, then you're getting into the 7. You're getting into the 7 place where it's a lot, okay? And I just want people to start noticing, like, what's causing it to get really, really intense for you, and how can you start to minimize and do things that are going to create a feeling of overall safety for you. Because, for example, when I went to hang out with my friends, something for me to notice, I had actually had a really productive work day, so I really wasn't worried about stress. I'd stopped by my university, I'd picked up a laptop, so without that work stress, it really wasn't that bad to be in a big group conversation, and I enjoyed it. And this is a thing for me, because sometimes I have to be my own therapist through this stuff. It's like, I can still have the experiences that I want. I can still have, like, I actually love going to like clubs, concerts. I love going on a big adventure and, going on the tube to go take a big adventure. I love listening to music and just thinking deeply about the world. But it's noticing that sometimes if I'm already at like a baseline, like 5, and I'm adding these really arousing things, I need to minimize what's going to be arousing. Usually for me, what that means is that I used to love to go on long walks. I used to love going long walks, listening to my music, and thinking deeply about my life. That was like my favorite thing. I did it every day. Unfortunately, I had to sort of miss out on that for now because it gives me that intense feeling now, which is so unfortunate because that's my favorite thing in the world. But usually, if I'm walking outside, so for example, if I'm walking outside, I try not to listen to that music that's going to evoke those deep emotions. If I notice, this is the thing, you can always experiment and try to see like what's a good way for me to navigate this, because I don't know, I want to know if this would be like universally applicable. This has really been a really big thing for me in my dissociation, but it probably would feel different for everybody. But for example, if I'm outside and I'm listening to that music, I notice that it starts to pull me into this mode where I'm already sort of at a little bit of a baseline that with just walking outside. So I just cut out the music, and I have learned to budget so that the music is going to be at home. If I listen to music at home, it's no issue. I'll sing, I'll dance. I don't care. It'll be like, the most absolutely emotionally charged music, and I love it because I'm at home and I feel safe. But if I'm walking outside and I'm already in that state of mind, to add another thing on top is really overwhelming for me. So I think it's just about learning to notice that you're getting into that state where it's like, okay, this is a lot for me right now, and learning to navigate like, okay, it doesn't mean that you cut these things out. I can't avoid fluorescent light forever or something, but it's about noticing why it is that you're getting into that state of mind. What are your triggers, and how do you budget so that you can feel better throughout the entire day, of rather than feeling really depleted all day and feeling really like in a bad state of mind by the time you get home, because that just I think it just overall makes your symptoms worse when you're just stacking, stacking, stacking. At least that's the case for me. So that's an activity I'd really want to be in the workbook, and teaching people how to notice that they're getting that arousal, and to navigate it and to see what the triggers are, and to learn to be a bit more moderate while you're healing, and then to slowly incorporate things as you go on in a way that feels safe for you. I felt really frustrated by that, like I said, because I think the reason I would push myself is because I was like, I'm young, I should be out, I should be doing all these things. I love doing these things. I'm frustrated. I don't want to stop doing them. I don't want to stop doing the things I care about. But it's like I can still do those things. It's just that learning to create a safe space for myself where I can continue to do these things overall, rather than getting really overwhelmed and then I have a crash and I'm at home and I can't do anything. I think that's been a really big thing for me, and a big thing for, I think, chronic stress, because it's the chronic stress that's sort of creating that feeling. But I think chronic stress is just learning how to be moderate while you're healing, and then building that tolerance again. I want to have a list of coping skills. Somatic exercises are great for dissociation from what I've read, and also from my personal lived experience. Yin yoga will heal me like nothing else. Like when I'm really, really stressed out, I come home and do yin yoga. It's like my mind is like healed. I love doing yin yoga, at least for a while. Like it really helps me in the moment, and I should do it more. I just forget. Like, okay, here's a few ideas. Now fill in the rest. I think the idea is just helping people navigate. I think more than just dealing with the emotions in therapy, it's also about teaching people how to re sort of configure their life to make space for that experience that they're having, and learn how to do this even when they're not in therapy, when they're not taking the medication. So for example, if someone's getting distressed by a memory coming up, or by an old, like a flashback, like how if it's not overly distressing, can you turn to a coping skill that's really useful for you? This is basic therapy stuff. This isn't me making it up, but I just thought for the purpose of the workbook, it would be cool to have people fill in their these coping skills that they have on hand. Like, this is what I like. Just have people journaling and really thinking about like what helps you, what's supporting you, like how can you keep turning to that, and having some fun pages for people where they can sort of have these things on hand and feel this sorts of agency over the way that they are sort of reconfiguring their lifestyle. It's funny because I think people nowadays love like the lifestyle stuff where it's like, okay, those lifestyle changes in therapy as well. And yeah, that emergency. So for me, I was thinking this today for myself, but I want to start thinking of some good tools that I can have when I get in this state, because it's actually very distressing for me. Even though I know what's happening, I can't think my way out of it. That's the thing. It's very physical. It's like very, very physical stress. that doesn't have any, it makes no sense to me. It's not like triggered by even a specific thing, but just like it's very physical sort of stress. So like to have a good emergency plan of like, okay, acknowledging, finding a good safe space. Usually that means that even though I'm such an active person, I used to be so active, and it's really frustrating to be like, I'm like, I want to go to 10 more places right now, but it's like, okay, you're gonna feel better if you go home, rest, all this stuff. Having a good little emergency plan for when you're in the state of mind, practicing, sort of practicing also having conversations with people and setting your boundaries as well. Particularly for me as a young person, it's really hard because I don't always want to tell people like I feel really intense, having an intense traumatic experience right now, or like not traumatic experience, like I've dealt with the trauma and now my body doesn't react the same way. I can feel really like it feels kind of shameful for me sometimes because I want to keep up with people, and then I'm like I don't know how to exit the situation and create like a safe space for myself where I feel these emotions, but I also don't want to be like a stick in the mud, or I don't want to always be feeling like, I'm giving up the sorts of high, because I'm actually I'm a very high energy person on the inside. Like I really am very mentally active. I like to be active in general, but it's like I just had to make changes. And I think that sometimes that can come from me, at least with like some shame of like I'm missing out, or I have to have that conversation with people, or I have to be like I need to leave early, or this and that, where I don't really want to ask people. And this is me working through myself, but I need to practice having that, like navigating that better, and centering the experience that I'm having and not having it be like, a loss, but also like a gain. Or yeah. So anyways, these are all the things that I've sort of developed so far. But oh, and then just I really want this workbook at some point to be filled with some fun journaling prompts, fun ones, and then more trauma related ones. So some empowering ones that I think it would just be good to have activities for people if they maybe want to engage with their healing journey a little bit outside of therapy, because I feel like it's just a big experience to have, etc. And sometimes you have things coming up outside of therapy. You want to maybe sit with it a little bit in a way that's guided and safe. So just some fun journaling prompts that are maybe dissociation centered or useful, like what makes you feel a sense of agency. I think agency was a big theme for me with having navigated um like a sexual trauma and everything. Like what makes you feel a sense of agency. Describe your happy place. Again, just something for people to turn to if they're having like a distressing moment. And then also some trauma related ones, if people feel up to it and they want to write down maybe what they're sort of sitting with, or memory. Describe the memory. How does your body feel? How can we best address this in therapy? So yeah, this is what I've developed so far, and I want it to be like little lined pages with sort of maybe some journaling prompts, some more activities, more coping skills and things, that are sort of ready for people, who are navigating this, and also educational, maybe some pages on more about the science of recovered memory, because I think it's been so empowering for me to have science for my experience that I'm making it myself. But I think in general, when I was navigated a justice system and we had an expert witness come in and explain to us the science behind trauma, and that was so life-changing for me back then. I didn't know any of it that much, and she explained so much about the science of why I was in that experience, and why I may have had that experience, how our brains work in stress, and etc. That was probably like that was one of the most healing things actually for me in the moment, because I could explain that to people. This is why it happens. This is what's happening to me. I'm not crazy. Like this is scientific. And that was, I feel like that experience even guided me here to a touch, because it was so empowering to have that science. And I just want more pages with explaining to people like the science. And I just think it's empowering to know what's happening in your own body, particularly from a medicine point of view, or from just a medical point of view. I think it's always empowering to give people more information about why something is happening, why, like, I want to be informed myself. Why is a medication working for me? Why is this a good treatment option for me? So that I can understand and feel that, like, sort of feel that sense of like we're doing this together and I'm making an informed decision. And that's what I really want from this. So I'm going to keep developing this. Hopefully this ends up being maybe like a PhD thing or something. I don't really know yet, but I've really been doing a lot of reflecting on this experience for me, and what it meant to deal with recovered memory, dissociative amnesia, etc. And hopefully I really want this to work. This is next step and I'm really excited for it, but yeah. So yeah, that's been basically everything that I've put together so far. It's not that much yet, but I would say that's a good basis for what I want to sort of what I've already thought about so far in terms of what people need to navigate the experience, things that I would have benefited from myself in my own experience if I had navigated that kind of therapy. I just feel so frustrated every time I hear the experience people are with dissociation are having in like a clinical setting. It's just so frustrating and just feels so even I think clinicians themselves maybe struggle to understand how to navigate certain elements because we don't have enough science, because it's been a bit stigmatized. So for example, recovered memory, it's like how do you like what's the best way to deal with that? I think that would be I really obviously this would require quite a bit of training, I think, as well from specialized individuals that maybe have a little bit more information about how to navigate dissociative experiences and etc. But I just really wanted this. I was like, where it's like I have so much information having navigated all of that myself. And it's like I just feel like I wish it's like, where you're like, I just want to jump in and do it myself. Like, let me fix it and etc. I just have really wanted to sort of do something a little bit more specialized. And I love DIY in general. I think I'm just like a big DIY person. So I was just like, I just want to just DIY it a little bit and yeah, I'm just going to keep learning. I want to keep reading it, etc. And the next step is that hopefully I'll finish this project and then it'll be a good starting point of like an indicator that this would be a really good thing to study in terms of a medication and in terms of treating people. But anyways, yeah, that's been my little chats. I think even as I heal more and go through my own healing journey more, I think it's going to be so cool and I'm just going to have more insight because I've been in this little overstimulation phase for quite a minute. And I've also had a lot. I mean, also life has been stressful because I've been working really, really hard. I've been sort of feeling, I moved. I felt financially insecure for a bit. I was working like a lot. I'm still working a lot. And I think that once I finish this project, it's going to be so. And I think that getting in situations where I feel more space to relax is also going to be really informative for me in terms of this process. So yeah, I'm still in the midst of my healing process. I just was like, I really want to do this for people with dissociative experiences because it's not fair. We deserve our own treatment too. We deserve people that understand our experience. We deserve people that are educated, that believe us too. It's so sucky. I was just thinking because I was reading about these clinicians that like they didn't even believe in certain disorders until they saw it in action. And I was like, it sucks to go to someone and they already don't believe your experience as a clinician. That's really frustrating and that's really painful. And I think that that's like always been in the back of my mind for me, like not like how do I feel safe or how do I get in a situation where I have someone really informed about what I'm navigating and really sort of there and really sort of ready to navigate my experience. That's been a bit tough to sort of work out. And I think that's it's just been part of my healing journey and why I've really gone into this because it's frustrating and it's painful and it's scary and it's like, what do I do with this? And it's like everything. So yeah, hopefully this was informative or if you have a dissociative disorder as well, I hope that gave you like some hope. I hope this pans out in like the next few years or something or next 10 years. I don't know. But oh, and the last thing that I forgot to mention is that personally, if I mean myself, I think knowing that the therapy treatment that you are about to undergo was actually made by somebody who understands your experience and who has dealt with like the ins and outs and the complications and etc. would make me feel really safe and it would make me feel understood and everything. And that was just also something that has made this process feel really special to me that I hope that one day it can happen. And then it's like, it's not made by someone who sees you as, from a distant light or as a patient, but made by someone who was you and who like gets it. And it's like, oh, this sucks, but you can do it and it's okay. And, there's actual tools for you that were made by someone, developed by someone who really understands like why you would need those tools in the first place and etc. And yeah, anyways, that's just been really special for me and I've just really been hoping that I can get this sort of done. And yeah, big ambitious task, but I don't know, I like a big ambitious task. So Right. That's it.